King Edgar, the Anglo-Saxon king from 959 to 975, is a ruler who perhaps does not get the credit that is quite due to him. Edgar became king, as I mentioned, in 959 on the death of Edwig. In the previous century, there had been a number of highly capable rulers who were vital in laying the foundations for modern England. The most notable are Alfred the Great, Edward the Elder, and Athelstan. Some, though, including Alfred's father, Athelwald, have been almost ignored, despite them laying the groundwork for the achievement of Alfred and his immediate successors. Edgar's case is slightly different. His reign is best remembered for relative stability in a troubled time. Following him, though, was the calamitous reign of Ethelred II, and it's largely because of that fact that Edgar is very often ignored. Edgar was born in the mid-940s, which means he was only about 15 or 16 when he succeeded to the throne. King Edwig, Edgar's predecessor, had himself died young, aged around 19. Edwig's reign had got off to a terrible start. He was discovered alone with two noble women at his coronation feast by Abbot Dunstan. Unsurprisingly, Dunstan was not impressed, and he separated the trio and ordered Edwig to return to his feast. Edwig, though, didn't forget this, and he soon banished Dunstan from his kingdom. But despite this, Edwig's reign didn't improve, and his rule proved to be unpopular. When he died, it could only be hoped that his successor, Edgar, could do a better job. And it soon became clear into Edgar's reign that he was indeed more suited for kingship than Edwig had been. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle praises him quite lavishly for his kingship, but does have a slight criticism for him in that Edgar used too many Viking customs, such as dress. However, the Chronicle is not overly harsh on him, and it does praise him overall for his reign. Nobility and rulers of other kingdoms were more than happy to pay homage to Edgar, and he is praised for having good judgment, and he ensured peace throughout his kingdom. But what undoubtedly did help Edgar is that there seems to have been something of a tailing off, during his reign at least, of Viking activity in England. For the time being, Viking raids were being directed elsewhere, but of course they would be back. Edgar, though, took advantage of that to bring peace and prosperity to his kingdom. His laws and the justice he brought to England are impressive and admirable. In fact, just over 40 years after Edgar had died, the Danish king Canute made reference to the laws that had been passed during the reign of Edgar, and he swore to uphold them. No doubt this was Canute's attempts to try and appease some of the Anglo-Saxons who were not impressed by having a Danish king of England. What this shows is the impressive authority Edgar had managed to wield. Early into his reign, Edgar recalled the wise Dunstan from exile and made him Archbishop of Canterbury. Between them, Dunstan and Edgar reorganized the church, first by driving out corrupt members of the clergy, and then by rebuilding the monasteries that had been devastated by the Vikings. Dunstan would be later made a saint. Edgar himself is believed to have been married 3 times. The most important of these relationships, in the eyes of history anyway, were the first and third. His first marriage was to a woman named Athelfled. With her he produced a son and heir, Edward, who would later become known as Edward the Martyr. His third marriage was to a woman named Elfrida. With her he'd have 2 more sons. One died in infancy, but the other would go on to become King Athelred II in 978 after Elfrida had murdered her stepson, Edward the Martyr. This was 3 years after Edward the Martyr had succeeded his father, Edgar. It wasn't all blissful peace throughout King Edgar's reign, though. In 966, a nobleman in the north of England raised an army and caused considerable damage. And in the south, in 969, Edgar seems to have been obliged to retaliate to a revolt in Kent. He dealt with this, but in fairly heavy-handed fashion. Both crises, though, ended relatively quickly. In 973, Edgar was crowned alongside his queen, Elfrida, in a ceremony that was the first of its kind. In attendance at the ceremony was the King of Scots, Kenneth II, who swore loyalty to Edgar. This is significant because even in the early 10th century, England and Scotland had a tempestuous relationship. And so, once again, this proves the stability of Edgar's reign and rule. What this ceremony also might indicate is that Edgar probably thought he had a lot more time left. But just 2 years later, after this coronation at Bath, Edgar died, no older than 32. And so ended Edgar the Peaceful. He ruled justly, wisely, and fairly. But little did he know his premature death would be followed by decades of turmoil, and Edgar's queen had no little part to play in that. It's an interesting thought to ponder if Edgar could have handled a sustained period of Viking raids. I suspect he could have, and it's a fair bet he certainly would have managed better than Athelred II.